About 2 weeks before Christmas, I was visiting one of our schools, and I was visiting the kindergarten classroom after we had had Mass. And I began to ask the kindergarten students about how they were celebrating Christmas. And I said, how many of you have your tree up? Well, everybody had their tree up or was going to go up, if you know kindergartners. And then I said to somebody, I got 2 trees at my house. And then this little girl puts up, she says, I got 2 too. And then somebody else says, well, I got 3. And somebody else had 4. And they were up in the top of the top floor, and they were in the basement, and they were all over the place. But each one sort of competing with the other. But there was a simplicity and a delightfulness that just want to reach out and grasp each one of them and hug them, being such wonderful and loving little children. And children have a way of doing things to us in so many, many ways. For those of you who are grandparents, you know what happens when you first become a grandparent. Your whole life changes. And there are so many other things that take place as children enter into our lives. As we come here tonight to celebrate this midnight Mass in honor of the birth of the Lord, it seems to me that it is so unusual that God would have chosen to enter the world through the birth of a little child, a child who was helpless and totally dependent on his mother and his father to care for him until he reached the age where he was able to work about the work of the redemption that the Lord had given him to do. But that is the way that God has chosen, and there is a simplicity in that message that comes to each one of us. And we need to see that message as well, that in Jesus, God has become man, and our lives are transformed because he has come to us and touched us. Each one of us who come here tonight to celebrate this Christmas Mass come with our own particular stories. Some come and they have found love over the past year. Some couples have married this year. Grandchildren have been born, and they enliven the lives of their parents and grandparents. And some have known success in business. We're all at different points and moments in our lives, but we come to hear good news, the good news of the birth of Jesus Christ, and it is a news that transforms us. We bring our joys and our happiness today as we give thanks. But although much good has happened in many lives, Christmas is for many a very difficult time of the year. On the local station, I recently watched a young man who was in the armed service extending greetings to his wife and to his little boy from Afghanistan. His family was separated, and I am sure that Christmas is a difficult time for him and for them. And there are so many other stories out there like that as well. There are the poor and the homeless. There are the struggles of many in our Catholic families with Hispanic roots, with immigration matters. There are the broken family relationships and divorces, and those struggling and facing serious illnesses. Some last year have lost a spouse or a child or a family member or a family friend, which makes the celebration of Christmas to be a very difficult time. And then there are simply the lonely and the tired who find it difficult. But I think it's important for us to hear these words of the scriptures that come to us to lift us up. Near the end of St. Luke's Gospel, he says, "Lift up your hands and see, your redemption is now at hand." And I would say to you, to all who are here, both those who are filled with joy and those who find these moments difficult, to lift up your head and see that your salvation is close at hand. The birth of the child, Jesus comes to bring light. It's a message that comes and changes the lives of people. Do not be afraid, for behold, I proclaim to you good news of great joy that will be for all the people. For today in the city of David a Savior has been born to you, who is Christ the Lord. The people who have walked in darkness have seen a great light, and upon those who dwelt in the land of gloom, a light has shone. For a child is born to us, a son is given to us, and upon his shoulder dominion rests. They name him Wonder Counselor, God Hero, Father forever, and Prince of Peace. We like to think that at Christmas time that we are all at peace, and yet we know that among the nations of the world there is not peace. We know sometimes even within our own families there is conflict and an absence of that peace that we might like to have. But it's significant to note the birth of Christ came in the middle of conflict as well. There were conflicts with the occupying Roman forces. There was conflicts with the Jewish community about how to deal with the Roman occupation. And then there was the conflict between Herod and the local leaders, and on it goes. And so we need to recognize that even with the birth of the child, there will continue to be conflict in our lives as much as we strive to overcome it. I suppose each of us have our own memories, and the older we get, the more memories we have. And I recall as a young boy celebrating Christmas at home in Canada where I grew up, and there was sort of a ritual that was followed throughout the holiday season. We lived in town, and my aunts and uncles and cousins all lived mostly on farms outside the city. And at Christmas time, the day before Christmas, and that was the day before Christmas, they all came into town. And they visited, and we spent time together, and that was when they left the gifts that they had prepared for us as well. And then usually for Christmas Day, it was just my family who was present, but it was always a very formal dinner that we would have. The Irish don't always drink coffee, they drink tea, and we always drank tea, except at Christmas. Christmas we would have coffee, and we would have wine as well, which was unusual for us at the time. And I remember those meals as being very special. There was a formality about them, and there were all the china plates and the silver and all that sort of thing that goes with a very formal dinner. To tell you, in my own family, those formal dinners have gone. They don't exist anymore. We have 35 or 40 people who meet in a small house, and we have a smorgasbord, and if the plates are glass, that's good too. Now, I always made a point to complain about that, to complain about the fact that we were not using china, until my sister told me, if you want to wash all the dishes, we'll have the china. But I guess what I'm saying is we each have our traditions. The gifts that my grandparents would have given to me would have been something that they normally would have made themselves. It might have been mittens that were knit, a sweater that was made, a very simple and ordinary kind of gift. Today, of course, Christmas is very different from that. Christmas is occupied with many, many things. Presents have become much more important. And in a sense, it has become almost a secular holiday. And so things have changed in many ways. And I suppose we're left with the option of either trying to pull ourselves together so that we don't lose sight of the meaning of Christmas, and at the same time recognize that others will celebrate in different kinds of ways. So we too are invited in this Christmas season to lift up our heads and see that our redemption is now at hand. And there are several obstacles that come in the way of our seeing the Lord's redemption at hand. And one of them is simply the matter of complaining about how commercial Christmas has become. Now, it has become that in many ways. We have Black Friday, and we have Cyber Tuesday, and we have all the other things in between, and we have the 60%, the 70%, and the 80% discounts from all over the place. And we can say, well, what does that have to do with Christmas? Well, I suppose in one sense it doesn't. But in another, maybe it keeps us aware and it keeps our society aware that we do celebrate this very significant feast. But we have the choice, you and I, of whether we're going to spend our time complaining about the commercialization of Christmas or whether we're going to continue to explore the meaning of it for our own lives and to allow our lives to be transformed and redeemed by that Lord who came among us as a little child. Another way, I suppose, that we sometimes keep in the way of letting the Lord come into our lives is by trying to keep him as a little child. The story of salvation does not end on Christmas Day, but it ends rather after his death, his suffering, death, resurrection, ascension, and the coming of the Spirit upon the apostles, that great sacred mystery which is at the very core of our faith. Because if we can keep Jesus as a little child, then to some degree we can control our God. And that's not something that we should be doing. One of the things that Pope Benedict said recently in an address that he made, and he pointed out how God is always faithful to his promises. And we certainly know that from reading the scriptures. But then he went on to say, but he often surprises us in the way he fulfills those promises. And so you and I need to know that God will be faithful to us, but we don't always know how he will fulfill the promises that he has made to us. Sometimes we can also prevent ourselves from coming to grips with the season by letting ourselves become so absorbed in very unimportant things. And sometimes we are simply unwilling to allow God to surprise us. And so we come this holy night. We come, dear friends, and I invite you to lift up your heads and see, for your redemption is at hand. A child is born to us, a son is given, upon his shoulder dominion rests. They name him Wonder Counselor, God Hero, Father forever, and Prince of Peace. To all who are here this morning, your families and friends, those traveling, those serving in the military, to the sick and the lonely and afraid, and to those watching us on television, know that today a Savior has been born, and he is your Savior, Christ the Lord. Blessed Christmas to all of you.